I was up north in Minnesota and Canada, having fun as a college kid. And not many news stations where I was. So I really didn't know a lot about it. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure if I knew where it was. I mean, I knew it was in the east, but I wasn't sure exactly where it was. Found out though.
Vietnam. The country occupies the eastern and southern part of the Indo-Chinese Peninsula in Southeast Asia. It is known for its long and violent monsoon seasons. Vietnam did not begin as a communist country. It had been under French control since the 19th century. It was not until during World War II, when Japan invaded Vietnam, that the country's power structure changed. Ho Chi Minh, North Vietnam's head of state, formed the Viet Minh to fight the Japanese and the French administration. The Viet Minh were able to fight off the Japanese in major battles. The Japanese officially withdrew their forces after losing World War II. The French wanted to take back control of Vietnam after Japan left. But the communist influence from China in 1949 was now too strong. Minh's forces began to fight back against the French. The war ended after the French lost an important battle at Dien Bien Phu. They were forced out of the country, and Vietnam was left divided with Emperor Bao Dai struggling to stay in charge. Many of the people in Vietnam did not like Dai. They saw him as a French puppet, considered his rule the same as living under the French administration. Ho Chi Minh's forces in the north rose up against Dai, taking the city of Hanoi and declaring it a Democratic Republic of Vietnam, with Minh as the president. Communists controlled the northern part, and those who still supported Dai and the French controlled the southern. The control in South Vietnam was weak. Every day, more and more people began to turn against the government. Trained and armed forces were coming in from the north, calling themselves the Viet Cong. America became involved with Vietnam because of the Cold War with Russia. Past U.S. presidents had sworn to protect countries that were threatened by communism. President John F. Kennedy saw the danger that Vietnam was in and sent advisors into the South to help their army. After an American ship, USS Maddox, was attacked off the coast of North Vietnam, Kennedy's successor, President Lyndon B. Johnson, sent in troops to the South. But Darrell Fulfer, born in Urbana, Illinois, knew nothing about the war going on in Vietnam.
Graduated from high school there in '62. Went to Bemidji State in Minnesota. Listen up closely, kids. I didn't do well my first year. I was in Canada hunting and fishing more than I was in the classroom. And they don't give you a good grade for hunting and fishing when you have to take English and other classes. So my first year of college didn't do well. I got out of that summer after 3 quarters. We were on the quarter system up there. And went down to Vicksburg, Mississippi, where I had seniority on the railroad, and worked there trying to get enough money to get back into school. That's when I was drafted. That would have been 65.
During the Vietnam War, about 2/3 of American troops were volunteers. Others were draftees.
The Draft Lottery, a live report on tonight's picking of the birthdays for the draft.
there was always an opposition to the draft, even before the United States got involved in Vietnam. As American troop strength in Vietnam increased, more and more men sought to delay their military service in illegal and legal ways.
Hell no, we won't go! 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 Hell no, we won't go!
Dodgers of the draft ran to Canada, forged military ID papers, went to college, and even made up health conditions to get out of fighting in Vietnam. But Darrell's father had served in World War II. He saw it as his American duty to fight as well.
Thinking that, well, I can work my way out of this. And so I enlisted for communication classes, radio. At that time, they called it fixed station communications. And took my basics in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. No, I was college, and everything is fun at that time. So I had no idea what boot camp was going to be like. But it was definitely an eye-opener when I got there. I went by train, and when I first got there, they herded us all off and into this big room. And they were going through the names and muttering, and everybody was standing around. Nobody knew what was going on. They didn't give us any instructions. And so they called me out, and they said, "You're a college boy. I want you to sit over here." And I only had 1 year of college, and that wasn't very good. I was in Canada more than I was in my classroom, which if you go to college, don't do that. But they wanted me to read the whole thing for signing up to individuals that couldn't read or write. And my line was pretty long. Really kind of sad. So I'd read it to them, and then they'd make their mark, and I'd put my name next to it. And in boot camp, you're in this big dorm where there's no walls or anything, it's just one big hall and bunks stacked all over the place. So 5 o'clock in the morning, they come through and roust you out. Run you out there into the big yard, and when I call your name, I want you to say, "Here's Sergeant." And Fulfer, here what? Here I am. Step up here, boy. So I'd go up there, and I'd have to move rocks from one side of the compound to the other side. My boot camp, I happened to be kind of lucky. I got a better meal than the rest of them because I was the best shot at the rifle range. And of course, the commander, that's a feather in his hat. And I got to sit not with them, but close to the officers, and I got served, where normally you go through the line with your tray and they slop on whatever there is to eat. Immediately after basics, they sent me up to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, where the classes were. I thought I had made things better than the classes were all 13-month classes, and I had 4 of them. So I thought, got it made now. There's only going to be 3 months after my classes that I'll have in the Army. But when I got to Fort Monmouth, they had shortened all the classes. We were going 6 days a week, and we were going 12 hours a day. So our classes were shortened drastically. I think it was like probably about 6 to 7 weeks long, and it used to be 13 months. Lived in barracks, had classrooms, and during that period of time, I married my junior high sweetheart. at the Fort Monmouth post, it isn't a normal Army post, it's like a college. And somebody broke into the pop machine, stole the money and stole pop. So all passes were canceled. I had made arrangements to go home and get married, and they canceled my pass. Well, my wife said that's not going to happen. So I stuffed pillows in my blanket and left. So I was AWOL. Other soldiers that were with me, when they called the name for attendance in the classrooms, they all answered for me. And so nobody knew I was gone.
My name is Matrona Penelope Fulfer. I go by Penny. Okay, he was in the service and I was going to school. I tried to get done early so I could get married right away because we've been, boyfriend and girlfriend for years. And so I worked very hard, graduated in 3 years. And I had Veterans Day off to prepare for the wedding, and he came home and we were married in 1965. And then he had to go back to New Jersey where he was getting his training, his Fort Monmouth. And we were together a very short time, really. Then he had to leave, and we were only together then that short amount of time as a married couple.
Then graduated from the school and went to, they gave me, been a long time, it was either 5 or 8 days to go from New Jersey to San Francisco, and then they were shipping me out.
I cried a lot. His parents took us to the Gulfport, and we were on the beach, and we both got burnt. Well, he got burnt. And then he left, and we just cried, his mother and I.
My first assignment was Okinawa, 999 Signal Company in Okinawa. Got in Okinawa, was there not even a month because I didn't even get my paycheck yet. And we had a full dress where we all stood out there. And they came by and they pointed at different people. And they pointed at me. And I was one of the, I think there was like 70 of us that they sent into Special Forces camp. And we had training there in Okinawa for Special Forces. You go through all sorts of different training. You go through, of course, weaponry, guerrilla warfare. You do the scuba, the parachute jumping. Goodness, there's more than that. All of us had to have what they call 5 MOSs. That's military occupation services. And so we had to specialize in these. We also had to have cold weather training. Now remember, this is Okinawa. So they taught us how to ski on straw in Okinawa. And after we finished our training, they gave us all wool uniforms and winter attire, and they sent us to Hokkaido, Japan. And we went up there and had a 10-day mountain excursion where we slept in snow caves. And it was awesome. I enjoyed that part. And we all thought, hey man, we don't have to go to Vietnam, you know, we're going up here to this snow country and we'll enjoy ourselves up there. And we did. We had a very good time up there. It's the first time Americans had been at the post that we were at, and the Japanese soldiers had made a monstrous ice sculpture of a dragon, detailed. The snow was so deep that we walked from barracks to the cafeteria in snow tunnels, and it was awesome. They sent us back. We landed at Okinawa, and we got off of one transport plane and got onto another transport plane, and they shipped us to Vietnam.
There was still, of course, a war in Vietnam. Despite rocket and mortar attacks in the last 24 hours, the situation there is considered to be a continuation of what military spokesmen call a lull. And preparations are going ahead for the withdrawal of the balance of the 25,000 American troops that are to be out of Vietnam by the end of August. But turning control back to the South Vietnamese is not a simple matter.
The weather in Hokkaido was probably 15, maybe 10 degrees. And when we landed in Vietnam, it was probably about 112, and we were still in our wool outfit. So we went to a barracks where they supposedly briefed us on what we were supposed to be doing, and we got uniforms for there. And then we started our mission. Our mission, we were what they called TDY, temporary duty. Our mission there was to stop the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail was a 9,940-mile-long trail weaving through Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The trail was used as a route to provide weapons, men, and supplies to support the Viet Cong. But there were also dummy routes on the trail, used only to confuse the Americans who were trying to stop the movement of supplies. The jungle surrounding the trail gave it excellent coverage over what was going on at ground level.
And we were flown to Pleiku, and then we went by helicopter north and west, which is no longer Vietnam. And they dropped, I think it's about 132 of us in the jungle, and we made our base camp. It took us maybe a month to get our base set up. We had our underground housing that we had to dig, and we were digging in at our base camp, and one of the missions was to go out and put out what we call claymores. They're an anti-personnel. It's an explosive, and it has all sorts of small bearings and everything on the inside, and you can aim it. And we set up quite a few of those on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we had set some C4 explosives underneath the roadbed, so that when they drove over it, it would hit a percussion and go up. We were attempting to slow down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, where they have bringing all the ammunition and food stuff and things like that for the Army and the Northern Army that's in the South. We stopped it that day, and after we stopped it, of course, they tried to find us, and they were chasing us. I did not have a radio at that time. Usually that was my job, is to carry the radio, so I could run pretty good. We had patrols out at that time, and our first part of the combat that I was ever in, I think the 2 or 3 firefights, I don't think I ever saw them. All you saw was muzzle flashes, and you shot at the muzzle flashes. There was, at those times, it was real, a lot of jungle and undergrowth. We would go out, if I were to take the radio, we would call in airstrike. So we kind of did logistics, telling them coordinates and where the main roads were, because it just wasn't one trail. They had trails that went around because of all of our harassment that we were giving them. We never set up an ambush because there were never enough of us. Our ambushes were with claymores, C4, and aircraft. I had set our radio up to where I could talk to the Air Force, and on one channel, and the B-52s, when they were coming back from bombing up north, sometimes they didn't drop all their bombs. And so being on the ground and knowing exactly where the trail was, I could get them to drop on the trail sometimes. Have you heard of the Mountain Yards?
No.
Okay, they're they're Vietnamese, but kind of like their name, they live back in the mountains. They are ferocious fighters. Bow and arrows, they made their own crossbows, and they were very accurate. And a crossbow is a very, very dangerous weapon because it's quiet. And there's no muzzle flash, there's no smoke, there's no noise, and it will go a long ways. And they would use bamboo, small bamboo arrows, and they would peel back on the bamboo so that once that hit, it spread out. They helped us a lot. When we were harassing the Ho Chi Minh Trail, a lot of times they would go along with us. All of a sudden, we'd be walking through the jungle, and then all of a sudden there'd be these little guys walking next to us. Couldn't communicate with them. They knew what we were doing. And they definitely did not like the Viet Cong or the NVA or the Chinese. I don't know if they ever recruited the Mountain Yards, because the Mountain Yards didn't really like the Vietnamese people themselves. They kind of kept separate. And the Vietnamese didn't go where they were anyway. They were down in the plains usually, where they could grow rice. I always wanted them in front of me. We had one group that we weren't doing real well in a firefight, and they went to the other side. So that was always one of them in front of me. It's definitely a shock. I mean, you go, wow, how do people survive like this? You know, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. Yeah, it's they have families of 15 of them living in a small hut, one area, and that's it. They'd weave a mat out of some of the reeds, and that was their mattress. Yeah, rice meal.
Well, I was fortunate. My parents and I are very close, and they let me move back with them. And I got a teaching position in Lena Winslow. And I was there, and they were good about it, knowing he was going to be coming back, that then I could just leave. I left in January of '68. And with the folks, you just did what the folks did. And we have a lot of Greek families in Freeport, so we did a lot of things together as a family. I actually went to Greece while he was in Vietnam. And he wrote me every day, never missed a day in 2 years, I must say. I'm very proud of him. And I would be in Greece, and the postman would come around, and he'd say 5 today because it got delayed. Or he'd say 1, and he said, how does he do that? How does he write to you every day? But he did.
Dear love, hi sweetheart, happy Valentine's Day. Dear love, hi sweetheart, I sure feel lucky being married to you. I've been thinking of you all day, a little more than usual, and I've come to the conclusion that I'm the luckiest guy in the world. Thursday, dear love, I love you, little lady. I love you so very much. You don't know how good it feels to know for sure I've got no worries in coming home. I certainly wasn't the calmest person here. I love you so much, sweetheart. I love you. Wednesday, 18th. Dear love, hi honey, I got some good news for you. November 19th through 25th, R&R, Hawaii. All my love forever. Darrell.
Oh, how could you not? It was on the TV every night. Newspapers, negative, positive. You got to see the war in your living room every day. People getting killed, people being carried away in body bags. And it was hard not to be involved and see what was going on.
They called us back to hold our base camp, which the enemy had no idea where we were. We were out in the middle of no place. There was nothing. And we never came back the same way. But they did find us when we came back, and they said, you can't go out and do any more harassment on the Ho Chi Minh. Colonel Ladd was our officer that would fly in. He didn't stay with us. You know, the officers, they'd rather be back in where they have hot meals and showers. But he flew in, and because we had to have a special patrol out for his flight coming in, because the helicopters didn't land in our fire base, they landed outside, and then we'd bring them in. Shortly after that, all we had was patrols around us, where they pulled all of our missions in. And of course, we're sitting there, I don't know, it must have been at least 2 weeks, week and a half, 2 weeks. And the Vietnamese found us, and they decided that we shouldn't be there. We had about somewhere around 3 days, 3 nights of trying to survive a battle. And we did. They stopped. Several of us were flown from there back to Saigon, where the 6 of us that made it back to Saigon, they put us with other units. And I was with, left us there after the TDY. And they left me there with Long Lines Battalion South, which is a communication battalion. And we made microwave communication stations. I built 3 of them. And part of the mission of that was to get communications throughout Vietnam. And while I was in the Long Lines Battalion, a lot of the units that were going out into the jungle needed communications, so they would come to us for carrying the radios. They call them PRC-9s. When I was with Special Forces in Vietnam, there was no communication with home. But when they sent me to Long Lines Battalion South, and I had the opportunity to get involved with microwave, and we even had a satellite at that time. Matter of fact, I set up Vice President Humphrey's satellite communication when he wanted to call his wife. They pulled me out of Phan Thiet and brought me over to Saigon, and I had to set up for the satellite just for them. And they cleared the whole complex, and I was the only one in there, so that security. He was talking to his wife, you know. Yeah, after that, we were in a small base camp building a microwave station, and we'd been hit a couple of times, mortars and small arm fires, and the guys were getting kind of tired. We're only a base camp of about 75, 80 guys, and I had the microwave building up, and had some speakers, so I put the speakers on the outside and got a radio channel from, I think it was from Japan, and the Beach Boys was on, Good Vibrations, and I put that on the speakers for all the guys to hear. There was one time that was a good time. I had found a wild hog and shot him, and I was at I think it was the base camp Phan Thiet, which is on the coast, and we cooked him, and then I buried him in the sand. And the next day we had a big party, and it was the best meat. It was the first fresh meat we'd had. And after I started playing some games like that, then I started, there's a network called Mars. They are radio people that have some pretty fantastic setups. And I would contact one, and then I could get him to call a phone number in the States, and then they could talk. But we needed him, and they needed me, because it wasn't two-way communications, it was single communications. And so, for example, if I called my wife, I'd say, "Hello, hon," over, and they'd click, and then she would say something, and then when she was done saying, they would click theirs, and we'd talk back and forth that way. I had lots of the soldiers over there talking that way on Mars. My wife was cleaning out the attic with her father. She was staying at home with her mom and dad in Freeport, and her father found a gun in the attic and picked it up, and it went off and shot her in the arm. And so she's calling me and saying, "I've been shot." And I couldn't understand what she was trying to say because of the over, on, and off, and over. And finally I realized that she was telling me that she was shot. And so it was a different situation. I'm in Vietnam getting shot at all the time, and she's the one that gets hit. I don't remember much downtime. Always seemed like there was something either had to be done or something that you were running from or running to. Never seemed to be, I can't really, of course, you know, downtime would be something that you would like to remember, but you don't. I was not given R&R until the very 2 months before I was to muster out. Being married, I hadn't seen my wife for 2 years, so I met her in Hawaii for R&R. That even got cut short. Our fire base was getting hit, so I couldn't get on the plane and get out to Saigon, to fly out from Saigon to Hawaii then. But so I lost 1 day there. January 1st, 1968, and that's when I came home. They said that all flights were canceled, and nah, I'm going home. I've been here 2 years, I'm going home. So I volunteered for a gunner on the helicopter, and we took a couple of passes over where the gunfire was coming from, and then they took me on over to Saigon. I got off there. I left everything. Didn't have everything worthwhile anyway. But yeah, that was my coming home. I got to, we landed at the air base in Saigon, and I went from the chopper across the tarmacs to the aircraft. And they had my ticket there. Well, it's not a ticket. They had my sheet there. And then the MPs took my weapons, and I climbed on. I was coming home. Flew into San Francisco, and they had MPs all the way along the line from where we got off the plane to the buses. And, well, you guys don't know, but they, while I was gone, skirts were below the knee when I left, and mini skirts were in when I came home. And it was a shock. I mean, a total shock. And I thought, you know, the MPs are standing there because all those guys are coming out of the aircraft, and holy smokes, look at these girls. And but it wasn't. It was because of people not being against us. When I went back to school, the school I went to, Bemidji, in northern Minnesota, has tunnels to all the classrooms because in the wintertime the snow gets so deep you can't get there. And so you walk out of the tunnel, and then you got to go up steps to go to the classrooms. Well, when we would be walking to the classes and come out of the tunnel, we'd have people up above spitting on us. And one of my instructors, English, first paper they asked, you know, well, what did you do last summer? And so I wrote it down, and he gave me an F and put baby killer across the top.
When we went back up to Bemidji, there were protesters, and most of the guys did not want to wear their uniforms. Well, he didn't need it anymore, but yeah, that was hurting because he watched his fellow soldiers get killed. It was not a good time. The war continued after that, so it was still going on, protesters. Well, we were in Bemidji. He got home in January, and we immediately had to leave because they, like a 1 day notice. So we bought a car, went up there. He only had a real light jacket because he'd been in Vietnam. And when we got up there, and I had rented a trailer, and it was 40 below zero, if you can imagine. And he had this little light jacket, and the car wouldn't start, and the heat went off. And you know, you think about it, at the time it was bad. He had to walk to go get gas for the car and the trailer and this little thin jacket. But we adapted, and we enjoyed it up there. Beautiful country. He's a hard worker, always been really a hard worker. So we were able to pull this trailer onto a piece of land that had never been settled. He dug the well, he dug the septic, and we got a dog, and we adapted real well and got back into society. And it's a good place because it was pretty much the wilds up there. It was a good place. No, he was the same guy, but he had been through a lot, and he had nightmares at night, a lot, and wake up, I don't want to say screaming, but upset. And so, just tried to be understanding. But no, I did not view him differently. It was the same guy.
I think it totally changed me. Well, my wife told me it did. I was kind of well, when I first went to college, I didn't really go to classes. I was too busy hunting and fishing. I was having too much fun. When I came back, in essence, I did a 4-year college in 2 years. So it definitely, life definitely got my attention. And it changed me in that way, that's for sure. None of them made it home. So I thought one of them did, and took my kids on a vacation to New York. And he was from New York. His dad owned a restaurant or a little cafe on 33rd and 3rd, Ron Conklin, and went to the Vietnam Wall. Wasn't my choice to go there, but we went to the Vietnam Wall, and I was reading, instead of going to the wall, I was reading the book that's there, and his name was in it. And so we didn't go to 33rd and 3rd to see if his parents. But yeah, didn't, I know of none of them that I was close with came home. It's just like in the East right now. I mean, how many years have they been fighting? They've been fighting over there for over 2,000 years for the same things. We don't belong there. We need to take care of our own people. Yeah, we didn't belong in Vietnam to start with. It was a civil war, and they thought we had to be there. United States can't be every brother's keeper.
I first met Darrell over the summer. I had watched a veteran's interview before his and thought that I was completely set on choosing that veteran as my veteran, but I am completely indecisive, so I decided to look at another veteran's interview before deciding. And the veteran's interview that I looked at was Darrell's. And I don't know what part of his story attracted me the most. Maybe it was his voice or his sense of humor or just the way he told his story, but I was completely set on choosing him as my veteran. I spent weeks working on his documentary where I cut up clips and found B-roll and did voiceovers and things like that, at things that all the vet doc students go through when they're first working on the documentary. And it got to a point where I needed personal pictures from him. When I had first met him in person and I saw him and he came to the school to drop off his pictures, it was very shocking because I watched him every single day in class when I was working on his documentary, but to see him in person, live as a human in front of me was completely shocking, but it was also somehow comforting because I felt like I knew him and I've met him before, even though he had no idea what I looked like. Darrell's story was the first story that I'd heard about the Vietnam War. A lot of Vietnam vets come back and they don't really talk about what they went through over there, and my grandfather actually served in the Navy during Vietnam, but he never told me about it. That's all I knew, was that he served in the Navy. He didn't tell me any stories. He didn't tell me anything about what his life like was there. He was a very quiet person whenever it came to talk about his time in war. But with Darrell, he shared so many things with me that he hadn't shared with his wife, and probably might not share with anyone else. But he says that he's opened up as a person. He talks about it more, which is great. That it's scary also that I'm the one who made him feel comfortable enough to share. I got to see a piece of his life, whether it was from the pictures that he gave me or the VHS tape where I got to see home videos of just their life, and it was very strange just seeing him like that in person back so far back then that I wouldn't have seen if he hadn't gave me the video. And we emailed each other all the time, and we've gone out to dinner, and I know that even when I graduate and go on, that Darrell and I will still continue to talk to each other and have the particular bond that we do have. Now as I look back on it, Darrell and I are best friends. I've learned lessons from him and his wife that I don't think I'd learned from anyone else. Lessons like love and strength and perseverance and survival. And I think that's why I chose the name of the documentary, Survival, Day by Day, Minute by Minute, just because when I was working on his documentary, there were days where I just was so frustrated and so angered, and I just decided to take a break from it. And I realized that I had to take it minute by minute, that I had to, focus on minute 1, minute 2, minute 37. I had to just slow down and realize that life can't move as fast as I want it to. So I think the Vet Doc program gives students an opportunity to grow as a person and to grow a strange bond with a veteran that they choose, because it's a class like no other. There's no schools out there that do what we do, that bring veterans in to interview them, to hear their stories, to let them know that they can be heard. And you give these students the opportunity to make friends where you probably wouldn't have made friends. I know that without this class, I never would have known about Darrell. He never would have known about me. We never would have became best friends. So